Hi, everybody. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Revit Roundtable. My name is Robert Shively. I'm the Southeast Chapter Leader. I hope everyone enjoyed their holiday break off. Today, we're going to recap our thoughts on last year's Revinars and really do a quick overview of each episode, starting with October's episode. To better understand our audience on today's Revinar, we are going to start a poll. And give everyone the opportunity to identify their individual industry segments while we discuss our thoughts on last year's webinars. So the title of this webinar is Recap. In this episode, we decided to look back at what we did in 2018 and really ask ourselves, how can we make this better? How can we improve this webinar? With the beginning of the new year, we really wanted to approach the webinar differently. The goal of this platform is to collaborate across the industry in order to exchange processes and procedures so that we can all work more efficiently as an industry. So with the first question we asked ourselves really is, what approach did we take in the past webinars?
Well, Robert, I feel like there was a definite lecture approach with like forced moments of silence for questions as opposed to an open-ended and like organic collaborative feel, you know? A lot of what we put together was not scripted and it led to hiccups in the flow of dialogue. And I'd really love to see that change in future webinars.
I would really have to agree with you on that, Ava. In your opinion, what could change about the current presentation techniques?
I think it would be helpful to find a way to get more audience interaction by doing things like guest appearances, interactive questions, maybe even guest hosting. I think these options would improve the exchange of information. I really feel that we are all students and we are all teachers, and there will never be a moment where I know everything or I know nothing. We all have something to learn from one another.
What you said really highlights our team motto of collaboration. I think the webinar should steer away from just a constant flow of information and really turn into something that encourages us to stand together as an industry. I think it goes without saying that there are some studio secrets we will all keep locked away in our arsenals, but some bits of knowledge shouldn't be kept secret. If you can Google it, it should be open for discussion. For example, giving everybody an understanding of the capabilities of Dynamo without necessarily handing over the script that was written.
To your point, Dynamo has been an excellent tool that we have used for problem solving. For example, my team will point out parts of the workflow that really slows down production, like adding spare numbers to schedules or mass applying elements to a work spec. We then are able to solve those problems and kinks in the workflow with a resource like Dynamo.
You know, you really summed up the concept of collaboration with just one example. You aren't just working on things that better your own workflow, but instead you're working towards bettering the workflow of the entire team. That is something that I would really love to see integrated into the methods used in future webinars.
Hang on, guys. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties here. Can everybody hear me? Is everybody enabled to speak? Hang on 1 second. guys, can everybody hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. We got disconnected there for a second. So really moving forward, we wanted to start a few more polls that we could get some feedback based on the example that we had just discussed. So our next poll is going to be how we should incorporate collaboration, where it's a guest appearance, like a segment or an open panel discussion. Or we can have episodes where really we have interactive Revit work sessions where we're actively working together to work towards a solution on a problem that someone has come across during that month.
So like that could be something where, you don't know how to work with reference planes and we actually open up a session of Revit and really work through any problems and find
solutions.
Right,
like for example, one problem on reference planes that we just came up with is that they, you can have a bunch on different levels, right, Molly? And if they're all on different levels, but they're on top of each other, you can't tell them apart. So, that's one thing that we're still having to work through. So.
And then the next option that we have is games like Revit Jeopardy, where we include prizes and try to really make this a lot more fun for people to be involved in it. And another option we have is guest hosting. So we could hand this over to like Brett Daniels or Kevin on here and have some people, kind of just discuss topics that they deal with on a regular basis in their own studio.
Yeah, and Tim McDougall, really your video episode on 3D modeling and showing that to the clients, that was fantastic. We would love to have you kind of walk people through those steps that you take to kind of get to that client presentation. Does anyone have any other thoughts or feelings on really how we want to direct this call through 2019? How to make the most of our hour every month that we can spend together? Tim, does that sound like something that you would like to do? Not trying to call you out or single you out, but is that kind of the direction that everyone would like to see this Revinar take this year? It seems like right now through the polls that the interactive work sessions would really be the best. So I think that falls in line with an interactive work session of a practice sample project that we can all kind of show and work through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of interested in stuff like that, and I think this poll would have been a good one to have maybe multiple choice because while I clicked on guest hosting, I would also say guest appearance segments as well.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, we're trying to learn with you guys how to actually control this webinar. So any feedback like that is fantastic. We really just want to open it up and be as collaborative as possible. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, Robert, just to pile on exactly what Tim was saying is,
I think we lost you, Kevin.
It keeps muting I think automatically.
Oh, that's strange. I unmuted everybody. Can everybody control their own audio? Apologies for this technical glitch here.
Yeah, I'm back. I was just going to say you had 4 good options that I think knowing who's showing up to the webinars, as well as using your email list. I don't know, I keep getting muted in the middle, is ranking these, because I think people do like to have some fun in having some games involved where there's prizes will keep people interested. You've got a great audience of people who have a lot of knowledge who can share that. And so switching it up, whether it's every month you do it a little differently or 1 month you split between a couple of options, just a matter of maybe doing a survey offline.
Okay. Yeah, that's another good point, right? Intermittent survey to kind of steer this. All right. So we did have another question of trying to have another direction to go down. So we worked on a few different presentation techniques last year throughout the Revinars, but we really want to know what benefits you the most, or what would benefit you most in the future. For instance, an educational lesson or a topic.
Exactly. 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 Good. Okay, let me clean this up. I'll get it to Christian and then I'll publish it and we'll be ready to go. Cool. Thank you.
It looks like you're unmuted, unfortunately.
So on top of educational lessons, you know, what I think we're really having an internal struggle of, do we go more conceptual, so really understanding what it means to work in Revit and work in 3D, understanding the differences from working in a flat plane to now extruding, or do we actually, you know, kind of go deeper into this is how you do this, like an open Revit session, or just having more so of like open audience discussions where everybody just kind of puts in their input and talks through without necessarily being inside Revit. So we'll give this poll just a few more questions if anybody has any interjections here, anything to further, because I know our options are kind of vague. So it looks like the response here majoritively seems to be the direct educational lessons. And I think from both polls now, we kind of understand that it might be best to just open up Revit and really do walkthrough lessons.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. So really moving along past really understanding what direction we need to take in this next year, I think we want to go through a few agendas and really recap where we've been and where we're going this year. So the first agenda, if you guys can recall, it really just got our feet wet here. So we went through a couple of poll questions and really developed some processes and procedure discussions. And we're trying to understand what the major challenges were in working with Revit, knowing that FCSI standards are obviously at the top of everyone's list, which are constantly being worked on as we speak. I think there's a board being formed to take the standards to the next level and build on what we already have to make it better for all users and for all creators and organizers and everyone involved. That was October. November, we really focused on a lesson plan, so we started to explain what is work sharing. We got into Revit, like what is Revit? What is our goal for Revit? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to produce? So the discussion and the audience input, we really wanted you guys to come in and talk about central model files, We talked about what a local file was, how it relates to those things. Then we moved on to the interface. We just showed you guys what the tools were, where they were, how everything worked, how Revit laid out, how the ribbon worked, project browsers, and then how the interfaces really differed between 2019 as it was completely changed in 2018. So we tried to lay down the building blocks of what Revit is and how to even begin to attack the software, understanding that the audience was about 50-50 new users and experienced users. We didn't want to start too advanced, but we didn't want to start too beginner to try to keep everybody's interest in mind. So with that, that was November. December, knowing that this was going to be a fairly light attendance, knowing that, through the holidays and everything, we tried to implement some more education at a higher level and really dig into family building. That's why we really asked the question about our presentation techniques, because this was more of a direct lesson in going through certain aspects of Revit, but we didn't really feel, as the presenters of this, we didn't really feel that was the best method. Is there any feedback from what you guys think the December webinar went, and the direct lesson, just kind of going through a mass of information?
Well, personally for me, what I thought of that lesson, what was hard is getting those typical hang-ups that Revit gives you. So as you're running through a lesson, things just not running the way that you would like them to and working through that. But I think that also it kind of shows that no matter how much Revit knowledge you have, that the working through it can always have bugs, and sometimes you just go through things and you're like, I know this works, but it doesn't work, and kind of just showing that it happens to everybody, no matter your level of understanding. And I think that doing guest lessons with these interactive ones too, because you have your own workflow and how you do things, but learning how other people do things would be really great. I don't know if anybody else has any input on that.
Yeah, and like go ahead.
I was going to say, if you can break down a session or segment into about 20 minutes, I think that's when you're talking like you are out to the world and you have no idea who's listening or watching the screen, about 20 minutes means you're going to keep their attention, and then it's time for question and answer, and maybe move on to a different topic to break it up a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was almost like too much information at once, right, Kevin? You kind of...
Yeah, that's it. It's just there's just only so much you can retain. So we try to break ours down a little bit shorter into pieces. But I think doing two main topics, if you're going to do a lesson, is a great idea. And you just let people know ahead of time of, hey, here's what we're doing the first half, here's the second half. You might get people who come in late, leave early, but they can get the one they're interested in or stay for the whole thing. But a few minute, 5 to 10 minute talk about something else in between, have your games like you talked about, contest. I think that's a really good way to use that hour if we can.
Okay. Yeah, no, appreciate it. And, we're really looking for help on the implementation of this every month in the agenda. So, if there's some things that anyone would like to see, we've so far just kind of ran with a topic that we think is helpful for everyone. But, from the manufacturer's side, if there's something in specific, for example, that you would want to learn, or Kevin, if there was something that you wanted to show that you just learned or would be very helpful, that's what we're trying to do. That's why we have the guest lessons, right? We're even happy for someone else to kind of host the topics for that month and really teach everyone, so you don't have to listen to our voices every time, but change it up and listen to some others' opinions and really get involved with other folks and start the conversation.
I'm happy to try to help. I think if you send out a reminder. Either you do it 3 weeks or right after this meeting, you send out an email and say, hey, let's work on the plan for next month. Here's topics. It's not something that you need to spend 2 months out in advance. But I know you have other people I've seen on the emails that have a lot of interesting features they use. Again, I'm going to pick on Tim and say like the 3D is something big. People really like to see that if you can break down some highlights of, hey, here's what will help. You don't have to get into every step you do, but a good quick overview. You're recording them. People can then watch it later if they want to.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's much appreciated. Okay. And also, we're really excited about NACM next month. Just to let everybody know, I think the webinar is going to be replaced by the lesson at the symposium. It's tips and tricks that we're really excited about for that. And then we're going to regroup and start again in March. So, Kevin, to your point, I think we have some time now that we can send this out and begin to get some ideas and some coordination going for March and really make it impactful. Like our example in the beginning of this with Dynamo, it's like, something that we just started recently using that I'm not sure how many other firms are using it, but it has really changed our workflow and has a great opportunity and ability for others to impact their workflow and make it, much smoother. So any tools like that we're learning, that could be a whole session on that, but we just want to help encourage others to see these types of tools. And, I know that we've had our challenges with how do you draw a walk-in? What's the best way to segment a walk-in? I know that there's also some things about, routing beverage lines, like just typical project tasks that we all have to fight. We'd love to work together and see how we can better some of those things.
I think Jonathan made a comment here in the questions dialogue box. I think if you split the time between theory and practice, that would help everyone. So I think that's definitely a lesson that we learned from our very last webinar, was that we had so much information that we wanted to share, and we didn't start with almost the very beginning of what is a reference plan. So I think that would be a good approach, is to maybe go through some definitions, because I think we all know that sometimes we think we know what something is, and it might be something completely else different. So going through basic definitions and then applying that in the workspace would definitely be a good way moving forward. So thank you, Jonathan.
You might already be doing this, Robert, and I apologize if you are, but if you do have your topic and you send out, an email a couple weeks out and say, does anyone have something they want to focus on that topic or share, that way you come up and say, hey, we're going to talk about creating walk-in coolers in March.
Right.
Anyone want to either be a host, have demos or specific questions that might help you focus on not just, hey, here's how we do it at SSA. Does anyone else want to chime in today? If you give them notice a week, 2 weeks out, they might be able to come up with, oh, here's the problems we're running into or suggestions. Just, again, some thoughts on what you all are doing as designers to share.
No, and I really appreciate your point, because exactly to your point, we're not interested in just talking about how SSA does things. That's not at all what we were trying to do. We're trying to educate, and we're trying to collaborate through this. I mean, that's why we're trying to push to have guests and other hosts for this webinar, because that's not at all what we're interested in, right? We just want to know everyone's gripes and try to make solutions to all get better at this program. So, I think if we do post a topic, like you said, and send it out a few weeks in advance and get some feedback, that's really where we need to be moving forward.
Robert, and don't take it a criticism of what's been done. It's been, I think, for a lot of people, very eye-opening and enlightening, and you're getting the dialogue started. It's just a matter of moving forward. I think those are a couple things that I'm just basing on our experience of doing webinars. It's very odd if you don't talk on these to realize you're demoing to a bunch of people that you have no idea if they're really watching or not.
Yeah, true.
And Suzanne here, she furthered this question on, what we're teaching. She said, what do you mean? How do you draw a walk-in? Do you mean as a box, series of panels with corners and doors? So that question of how do you draw a walk-in, we really wanted to figure out in our office because we didn't have a good method. So it's not necessarily like how would a walk-in be built in the field, but more so, do we use a family? Because if you use a family, then you have to go outside of your session or your project to try to construct it and constantly load it back in. And then if the conditions change in the architect's background, then you've got to go back into your family and adjust. And so we found other ways like using doors and using unconventional items other than what they actually would be used for to more easily draw in the project. So instead of, building a family that is panels, it's not really necessary to go that overboard, but maybe just creating wall types that allow you to kind of freely draw, because as we all know, it's not always just a square with a door on it. Sometimes things can get at crazy angles and odd conditions.
Yeah, it's really aggravating to try to take, 3/4 of an inch off here, 1.5 inches off here, and you're trying to modify this family on one screen, load it into your project on the other screen and hope that it fits again, and have to move it, 13/16 of an inch, and just adjusting it. And we've fought that battle, and like Molly alluded to, we've kind of overcome that by not using a set in place family that's a finite thing, but rather something that's more fluid, and using what Revit has for standards as far as systems, walls, and types of things to use those for these types of items. Like another example would be like a customized work table that is against the crazy angled wall that we have to work around. Well, no one's going to have a family for that. So that's why when we talked about family building last month, we alluded to modeling in place. So I hope everyone, kind of heard that and took that as a benefit, as a technique to think about, let's model this tabletop in place. We're never going to use it at 34.5-degree angle again, and let's put some legs under it and in an undershelf, and now we have a table instead of having to fight and be aggravated with this family that you can't quite get right.
Or even just unconventionally using like what you would have as an architectural ramp, and it would normally include railings, and it would be something for like ADA access to the front of a building, but then taking that same family that functions similarly to what we would want our ramp and our walk-in to be, just using that family and being able to draw your slope and incline. So by the off chance that you want to show off your 3D modeling skills, when you go to open up your project, it looks like you've got a ramp, a floor, your walk-in doors, your walk-in walls, and your walk-in door, and it really looks like you went above and beyond.
And Suzanne, right, to your point about the manufacturer building it, in our experience, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time to send it back to the manufacturer, have them adjust it, or even give them, like we've worked with a few manufacturers to give us like a base, what we call like a base family. It's just like a 10x10 square that we take, save, modify, redo, that we already have all the details for, sections, doors, all that stuff. But we've really learned through our experience that modifying all these things and creating them separately is just a bigger frustration and time taker than using the walls and things that we've found. So we could have a whole discussion on how everyone in the industry is building their walk-in coolers. I know to us, this is only one idea. I know Brett and Tim, I know your teams sure have another way of doing it, and those are the types of things we would love to just talk about it. How is everyone doing this? What's the most efficient way? Not everybody has to do it the same, but we pick up a few techniques here, and now there's no problem. Now there's no problem with it. The same thing with beverage conduit. I know, it's a little bit frustrating to us on how you show beverage lines, because if there's anything that we have learned from Revit is that it will allow you to document any amount of information that you want to document, right? Suzanne, I think our first call you were talking about the different water temperatures and things that come in on the families, and like it's part of the standard parameters. And it's like, there's an infinite amount of information that we can get out of Revit and extract and show to the client or engineers or whoever, but we really need to figure out, what is important and how do we get this the most efficient way and document the most efficient way. Whereas, if we can model a beverage conduit, up through 3/4 across to support bars and this and that, but really what are we, is it a waste of time or are other people doing that? I mean, are we showing the 3D model? Is it, why are we doing the things that we do? I just want to get everybody's input on some topics like that. I mean, a general topic for discussion or work through, right, could just be conduit routing. How is everyone in the industry showing conduit routing?
And one of the biggest things that I think I see coming from outside of the industry is that people really over-engineer whatever they're building in Revit because they think it's this, they know that it's this big giant tool that has all these capabilities, but sometimes it's just not necessary to go to that extreme extent. Sometimes, we may not want to show every single detail of a walk-in in our model because it's just never going to actually show graphically through the plan view that's sent to the end.
Yeah, overall, things are supposed to be conceptual. It's supposed to represent, the conduit. It's supposed to represent the walk-in. If they need the finite detail, they would find those kinds of items in the shop drawings anyway.
That's a really good point.
And for those details, right, when we started modeling families, I guess we're going to talk about families for a minute, but when we started modeling families, we detailed out all the hat channels, all the gussets and everything, but it's like, our families are, 3 megs and we have 50 of them and now our model is gigantic, whereas like if you just, some things are still good to do in 2D, that's what you have drafting views for. You can, detail your old CAD details, transfer them into Revit through drafting views and use your details there and add those to your sheets instead of trying to model these families in a way that you take a section, it's going to show exactly how it's built. Like I think, Suzanne, that's what you were kind of alluding to throughout having the manufacturer build it to show like how the slab is cut and all that stuff. But, to us, that's not really what we want to use Revit for. That's really for, technical details that are still done in 2D drafting views just like we've always done. I think Revit does a good job of, being a database and carrying all the information. And when we think about it from another perspective, being the architects or the engineers that, unfortunately, most of them don't use Revit, but for the ones that do, right, what are we trying to transfer to them through it? They're not looking at our models for all these types of things. They already have their own specific details and things for these items that we're just trying to coordinate. And like Ava said, it's really just like a conceptual drawing, for lack of a better term, in Revit and through our models.
Well, and I think that that's like one of the biggest misconceptions that you can have when being a content creator. When we open up our families, we see clearances used as materials and subcategories and all these different items. And because things aren't basic and easy, like in my personal opinion, all clearances or different types, whether it be just up against a wall or front clearances, they should all just be on one subcategory, clearances, so that when you're working through your different plan types, you turn off one subcategory. When we look at all the families that come through, you've got some people that use it as door swing clearances or drawer clearances or just front clearances or side clearances, or there's like so many different things, and we're really over-engineering our families to do what you would have maybe done in CAD, but it's just not necessary to do in Revit. And then it makes it really hard as the end user, the designer, to, kind of figure out how everybody's mind kind of over-created their family to then dumb it down for the drawing that you're trying to show.
To your point, with the clearances, a lot of the times they will be drawn in 3D, so there's an actual 3D box.
Yes.
That being is that if you draw it in 3D and then I go into an elevation view, if that element is modeled in 3D, now I can't see the rest of my piece of equipment because I have to go in and turn off that 3D modeled clearance box that was made. or I have to basically turn the transparency up on it so much, because if you have an element and you've only set the transparency of it to 75, now my, piece of equipment is going to be gray when I'm trying to show it as a dark color on my equipment plan.
Or even when, like, what you and I program things to use level of detail. When people don't use coarse, medium, or fine, but something that we've programmed internally is based off of the level of detail, the only way to remove it then is to change that. Well, then that ruins other things that we've programmed. So without truly understanding visibility and how that works, we're not using the full potential of, what we could do to make it easier in the end. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's one of the biggest things that...
No, for sure. I think going forward, we're going to talk about visibility a lot more, probably starting with things like subcategories and stuff like that. But right now, we're just trying to recap and kind of see where this whole...
what direction we want to take, right? Because, the direction, just like Kevin said, if we did a 20-minute topic on visibility, what is visibility? Does anyone even work with visibility? Do you know how to work with it? I mean, to us, that's very critical to how our documents print and show. And at the end of the day, right, our product are the documents that we produce. So how do you control your product being the documents through visibility, coarse, fine, the levels of detail, and also subcategories? I know, Kevin, you're working so hard on trying to coordinate all these subcategories, and it's crazy that, there's been left alone to just kind of run wild. We were working on a project the other day where, you want to show door swings in a project, but you don't need to show the drawer pull clearances. I mean, those are obvious. They pull straight out, but you want to show which way the doors hinge, because, that's very critical to the client, to the operation. So trying to figure out which freaking subcategory the drawers are on is so irritating and frustrating when you're trying to get a schematic out or a DD set out. So to us, things like that are, and this is kind of getting into the standards, the Revit standards that we really would like to start to see and implement. And I'm not sure if I'm speaking for anyone else, but I know this has been very aggravating to our team. And Tim, have you guys run into anything like that? A little bit of frustration through those types of situations?
Oh,
not to call you out, but yeah. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that, right, everyone kind of shares the same frustrations, and we can do these shorter topics and go through them and just start to understand, and then we'll know who to go to and what to talk about with the right people moving forward and get the standards going. But back to the webinars, right? There's so many topics, like we were just talking about, walk-ins and visibility, that those are the types of things that we really want to touch on, and to emphasize collaboration is very, very critical. So any input that you guys want to do, and Kevin, we'll send that, try to do better to send those topics out to get more people's input. But please, help us help you guys, right, get the most out of this webinar in this year. We really want it to be
Tim, I saw your name pop up for a second. Did you have any input there? I think.
Did I cut you off? Yeah, or like our great Howard Stanford said, let's give it up and go back to CAD, right? All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate this episode this year. We really wanted to kick off 2019, right? We wanted to move forward in a way that it's educational for all. We want to make sure that everybody is involved. We just want to get all the opinions throughout the industry from all aspects, from Kevin and from the content creators and the manufacturers, and then, of course, the consultants and the end users how all of these are affecting our workflows, and ultimately, what kind of time can we save together and be more productive and be more proficient and profitable.
And I personally would love to see when we meet all next February, I would love to put this February, actually next month, to actually meet some of you guys face to face. I mean, last year was my first FCSI event. I know Ava's too. Was that your first one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I met you all maybe for a second or saw you talk up on stage, but getting some of these open conversations and really putting names to faces and faces to names would be really awesome. So I hope I can find all of you guys at the next event.
Everybody will be at the bar, so it'll be easy to find everyone.
Does that wrap up this month's Revinar?
Yeah, does anybody have anything else you'd like to add? We're really looking forward to this year and what the Revinar can bring to the industry this year.
Don't be shy, guys.
Yeah,
we all
I've got
know
a
we have issues. Oh, go right ahead, Susan. Sorry.
Yeah, I've got a question. Do you guys all have the most recent standards that came from Worldwide? Because I sent them a couple of months ago because Robert had just changed companies, and I sent them to him on LinkedIn.
It wasn't me. I didn't change companies. I might check my LinkedIn, but
okay, but I sent them to you a couple months ago. Or you changed email or something.
Okay, well, I apologize. I'll definitely go back and look, and I'm not sure that the entire industry has them, but that's one thing that we're really dedicated to working with. I've been working with Kimberly and Wade as well on trying to get a committee together to work through the standards and really get them updated. Understand that you guys met and updated them. We really just think that the standards got put on hold after parameters. Parameters are really the extent of any standards that we have, and that's an amazing start because we know that that's like super important because it's the nuts and bolts to the entire program, but really there's so much more to it, like we discussed, ability
and I'm on Kevin's small group.
Right.
So so
those are the things that we're really excited to get as a standard in things, because there's content being created that is just very irritating and frustrating to use, and we don't want the end users to feel like that towards a certain manufacturer just because of the misunderstanding on how features of the software are being used to create a widget. So we're really excited about those standards and moving forward on those, and hopefully we can all start to come together and understand what everything means and just be better workflow. I mean, I know the manufacturers really put a lot of money and effort and time into all this marketing and everything that they do to help us understand what their widgets do. But at the end of the day, if it's not compatible with our program, with our software, with all of our individual templates, with the client's best interest in mind, we're going to try to find another widget that works better just because they flow better with our process and make our documents that much better. So, that's the kind of standardization that we really want to work towards, is just to better everyone and to better all the content from where we are.
Have you supplied anybody any kind of a list of like a top 10 manufacturers whose content that you love and why, and a bottom 10 of ones that you hate and why? Just from a standard standpoint.
I think that each manufacturer has their highlights, but I'm not sure that any one manufacturer has really nailed down all aspects of what it means to be like a fully compatible and really easy to use family. There are some people that are really great at door swings and some people that are really great with proper parameter use. Some people are really great with subcategories, but if that would be helpful, we could definitely create a list and even put that list out there for everybody to vote on and really get a whole group.
Yeah, and maybe more so than each individual manufacturer, but which what do they do right? Like, what are they doing right to not only exemplify that they're doing things right, but to share with the other manufacturers, the other content creators that, you know, we as end users really love the way, I'm going to throw Perlick out of the window, but they do a great job on their door swings. I was putting in a back bar cooler the other day, and you can change between 4 different door types: left hinge, right hinge, glass door, solid, stainless. To us, that type of detail is like definitely paramount. I mean, that was so
elevation.
It showed it showed an elevation. It showed in our 3D rendering that you know we did for the client, and they're like, yes, we want glass doors here because 2 doors were a part of a direct draw system, and 2 doors were for bottles. So, you know, it was a very easy thing to work on.
And I thought one thing that I think that isn't really highlighted is it's not necessarily that we're saying we're not going to use a manufacturer because they don't have proper Revit content.
Right.
But in the end, it makes it easier when there's no confusion because our notes may say refer to plan for door swings, and we may not have caught that the door swing on the refrigerator that we're using isn't proper, and it's because we're having a hard time getting the family to function. So, you know, we don't want it to come up that, oh, we're just not going to use True, or we're just not going to use Perlick. It's not necessarily that intense, but more so, you know, it makes everybody happy because then you don't have RFIs, then you don't have questions, then you don't have manufacturers replacing things because they didn't fully understand.
And a lot of manufacturers really don't know how to look at their own content, and KCL actually makes it very easy. And I've talked to a few of them, and a lot of them don't really realize how easy it is to look at their own content in KCL without even having to own a Revit license. That you can look at your content just basically online using the mobile app. And some manufacturers just really do not know how to look at their own content. And maybe a future webinar that Kevin can do is to show some of those manufacturers how to look at their own content without owning a license. And that might help them understand this a little bit better.
This is Mason Early from SSA, and we're just popping back in on you guys. I think our video or our audio went out for a second, but we're back with you now.
Yeah, Suzanne. Hey, thanks, Mason. Yeah, sorry, our main conference phone here kind of went out on us. So can you kind of summarize what you were just saying? We didn't want to miss it.
Yeah, is KCL makes it very easy for someone who does not have a Revit license to actually within KCL just using the mobile part of the app, even on your computer, just using it as if you would do a website to look at your own content without looking at a license. And some of them don't really know what their content looks like to a designer.
Right, and
can do a seminar for manufacturers to show them how to look at their own content.
Yeah, that is a fantastic point, because I think that's exactly it, and I think that's the frustration and I think that's the main disconnect between the manufacturers and the end users is exactly that. They don't know what their content looks like, how it works, how it interacts with the end users, and you know, we're hoping that the standardization of all these things will try to bridge that gap, short of like a summit meeting with everyone. But really, if we have a standard to go on, you know, we can work from there, and then have something to work from and to move forward on, and almost of what we expect as far as an end user and workability of your product, because we want to know every option that your product has, and we want to be able to implement it into our projects. But you know, understanding how it works and then having it show up in our documents are two things that just haven't quite meshed well together yet.
And maybe even after understanding how to build families, maybe it would even be helpful if we went into what it's like working with families. So dragging and dropping them in and trying to toggle the door swing and just showing how different it is, or you know, actually working with them and showing what that's like. That might be a good idea.
Well, and I can say this too. When it really comes, Suzanne, when you're talking about standards, and whether the manufacturer understands what we're looking for. You know, the manufacturer is kind of bent out of shape because we're telling what we need, but the content folks are giving them something that they're presenting back to us that we can't use in some cases. So I think part of the standardization is us talking to manufacturers, having them get a better understanding of what they're telling their content builders to provide them. You know, so it's not just a matter of like what we were doing, you know, here I'm showing my age, about the standards that we were kind of doing with CAD. The manufacturers had the same issues. So now that you're, you know, using Revit that has so many more options than CAD ever had, you know, that kind of puts them in the quandary of, okay, now that we got all of this, what else can we give you and make a standard? So when we're talking about door swings, when we're talking about parameters, whether it's utilities or anything else, you know, there are standards for specs, there are standards for drawings, and standards for how we want things to look on plan, and in our documents. So I think we also have to divide up what the standards actually are that are required. Yeah, there are all kinds of standards like that list that we had, you and I had discussed. There's a whole lot of stuff in there that Worldwide came up with, and they tried to cover every single thing on the planet. Well, we can't expect that of the manufacturers to cover everything on the planet, because most of that stuff on the consultant side, we can't utilize. So there is a divide between those kind of things that we can make those choices and help build those standards.
Yeah, and like I know another point of frustration and challenge for us has been really nested families. I think nested families are they give some people chills. I think they scare a lot of people, and I think they're totally misunderstood. They can be the greatest thing ever. I don't think they're utilized in the way that they should be. I know that there's been a lot of Revit models that could have been used better in a way as far as internal components. Let's talk about dish machines for a minute with a separate internal booster connection. You know, there's actually two connections, but how do you schedule that on your equipment schedule, electrical schedule, when those things haven't been nested? I know it's everybody's due diligence to check these things, but it becomes very challenging, and you have to have workarounds when, you know, the nesting is not properly done and easily scheduled.
Yep, or it makes your project browser look like a piece of crap.
There is that.
And another thing
And
too is
that-
what people don't realize. Oh, go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, believe me, and that's the subject that's close to me, is that because I've been on the manufacturer side. You know, bottom line is that manufacturers aren't architects, and content creators aren't manufacturers. And from my point of view is that if a manufacturer wants it in, it's not necessarily all about making it all pretty, but it's to make sure that that your product doesn't fail in the field, and that it gets scheduled right, but also that the right utilities are run for it. To your point on your booster tiers, and
Right.
dishwashers are a you know, I was Truman Donahoe's first customer at Champion. And believe me, is that he probably lost money on it because of things like that. You know, we had to make sure that it was right. And every dishwasher manufacturer does it differently. And there are things that I'm going to know just looking at it, but a consultant may not, you know, or a content creator may not. You know, so.
Right. And you know, consultants are, we'd like to think we're very educated on, you know, manufacturers' equipment, but you know, the manufacturers are the manufacturers. They understand every nut and bolt on their equipment. So to translate that as efficiently and effectively into a Revit family is really all that the standards are trying to provide as a guideline and a starting point for all of these families moving forward. yeah, we're really excited to kind of get these things rolling, and maybe some shorter webinars. I know we're almost out of time today, but we'll work on some shorter webinars, some more interactive work sessions. I think if everyone can help us get the most out of it this year, I think it can be a very positive and technical impact to everybody's workflows. We just need to get there and get some very interesting and conversational topics going. And
don't forget, we don't have a Revinar next month.
Yeah, so next month, don't forget that we will not have a Revinar because we do have the symposium, which at NAFM. We didn't want to have too much Revit in 1 month. I know that there's a tips and tricks session there, so we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say. And we're very happy to meet everybody for a drink, and let's talk about this some more. This Revinar doesn't have to be just one time a month. It could be, if it's shortening it up, it could be more, it could be less. I mean, let's really use this platform the best that we can throughout the industry and learn from each other and collaborate and
use it even more too is showing off that this is what we're doing as a food service industry. I think that this is awesome, and let's not forget that this is posted on YouTube, so we can all say that, reference back, look at what we've done, and I think if we all put our best foot forward, this could be something that we're all really proud to show that we have developed as a Southeast team and as a team of FCSI.
Yeah, it's really great because, as everyone knows, Revit was not made at all to do what we're trying to do with it. So I think we're really becoming a force in the food service industry using this product, and, being a guest, having guest speakers. It would be really awesome as a team to have someone from Autodesk want to come and sit and listen to us and see what these challenges are, and really start to make a difference in these things. Maybe someone does want to have our opinion, and there's a couple of small tweaks that we could do to the Revit software in upcoming feature updates and hot fixes that can help us all throughout the industry standardize these things and just be more effective. So, I think those as a team those types of things can really be the difference makers.
I'd really opt for a tar and feather activity for somebody from Autodesk, actually.
That part too, yeah.
Okay, well, I actually get along with my Autodesk friend, so I'm going to keep him out of it.
Okay, just the feathers. So. All right, guys. Well, we're out of time. We don't want to hold anybody else up. We will try to keep these to an hour, but as it moves forward, they might change shorter, longer. But let's keep the discussion going. Keep your thoughts flowing, and let's really look forward to this year. Let's make it really eventful. Let's make it impactful, and get these standards going and work together. And I think it can be the food service industry will be coming along in their Revit techniques and processes. So, even old CAD guys can get up to date with Revit, right? Like Howard.
Yeah, that's right. Like Howard, he can still learn some new tricks. That's right.
All right, everybody. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon. We'll see you in Orlando.
All right, bye.
Sounds good. Bye.